Thank you so much. Muchas gracias. What an honor to be here. Wow. We've heard it all. Our cup is full. We've been inspired, we've been motivated, we've been challenged. But now what are we going to do with all of this? Can we really be different? Can we do something extraordinary out of something very, very ordinary? I want you to know that the use of sand in analogies is really not the place to look for a sure bet. I mean, sand running through an hourglass means your time is running out. Sand running through your fingers implies that the opportunity is slipping away. Building on sand is never a good thing in construction. So, how did I wind up making a career out of tossing sand around on a light table? Well, I'm an artist, but it's not my fault. My mother was an artist, my father was an artist, my Aunt Carolyn was an artist. I even had an uncle named Artie. So go figure. My mom swears that my first solid food was Crayola crayons. So I became an artist. But I also loved telling stories. And as a kid, I would draw my own comic books. But you know, I was afraid that I could never make it as an artist. So I wound up going into advertising. I opened my own advertising agency, and at the beginning, I loved it. I got to be a part of the creative process. But after 18 years, my agency had grown, and had grown to the point where all I was doing was administrating. And so the stress of running a business I no longer enjoyed, and losing a wife to breast cancer with 2 teenage kids, it began causing sleepless nights and chest pains. My creative spark had gone out, and with it, the joy of living. So finally, I sold my business, but I really didn't know what I was going to do. I wanted to tell stories using my art. I wanted to tell those epic stories that would change people's lives. I wanted to make a difference. Not long after that, my wife sent me to the hardware store to get some mulch for the garden. And I was strolling down the aisle where they sold bags of sand, and one of the bags had ripped open and spilled out on the floor, and people had scuffed through it. As an artist, you see images everywhere. And so I thought, you know, dragging my toe through the sand, I think I can do something with this. So I got home with the mulch, but I also had a sack full of sand and a kitchen light fixture and some other table legs and pieces of equipment, and I started putting this collection of parts together in my garage, and I sort of assembled this rudimentary light table. And when the images started appearing there in the sand, I got a handy cam and I duct taped it to a tripod and I put it over to the top of the table and I plugged it into a digital projector, and voila, there on the screen were the images that I was drawing, huge. So I decided to call them Sand Stories. And it was really cool. But you see, I still had to make a living. And so I wound up getting a job as a concierge at a local hotel. But almost a year after I developed the Sand Story, a call came in. And they asked me to come and perform my Sand Story at one of their conferences. Now, they had really gotten a high-tech setup. And so when the lights dimmed and my music started playing through the state-of-the-art speakers, every grain of sand was in sharp focus up on the 2 giant screens behind me. And the images began unfolding under my fingers. And in the darkened auditorium, about halfway through my performance, I noticed that the room had become abnormally still. The hair on the back of my neck began to stand up, and goosebumps began piling up on my arms. It was sort of as if all of the air had been sucked out of the room. When the last chord faded into silence, I stepped away from the table, and nobody breathed. When the lights came up, many seemed to be wiping tears from their eyes. I'd never experienced the power and the intensity of a moment in that way. The audience burst into a standing ovation, and even with all the power of the moment and all of the fantastic comments, I still knew that I had to make a living. So I filed the whole experience under the heading of great stories to tell my grandkids. But the very next day, the phone rang again. And another request for a performance came in. By summertime, I was getting about 2 or 3 requests a month. And it was at that point that I asked myself, do you think I could really make a living doing sand stories? Now look, who in the world is making a living doing sand stories? It's a very comforting thing to have a regular paycheck, and the thought of jumping off the cliff and trying something brand new was really scary. I mean, I didn't know anybody that was making a living with sand stories or a sand artist. I didn't even know any sand artists. So I finally decided to give it a try. You can call it a leap of faith or just unadulterated lunacy, I don't know. But I was going to fulfill a lifelong dream of telling stories with art. Now, there were still hurdles to climb. There were lessons to learn, but believe me, it paid off. It paid off way better than a Las Vegas casino. In the past 7 years, I performed in 43 states and 23 countries. I've been in venues as large as the Lucas Oil Stadium where they had the Super Bowl. I performed for kings and presidents and CEOs and dignitaries from around the world. And they've applauded my work. And I even made it to America's Got Talent. I made it as one of the finalists. And so now 25 million people have seen my sand stories. Has it been hard work? Of course. Has it been risky? Obviously. At times it's been exhilarating, and at times it's been terrifying. It's been a little scary being here. But I want you to know that common, ordinary sand has taken me to places that I never would have dreamed that I would ever go. So here's the question. What is lying around you that could rejuvenate your career? What have you heard this week that could make your job an adventure or a new way of life? You know, way back in 1973, I was clipping my fingernails, cursing the fact that every time I clipped a nail, the clipping would shoot halfway across the bathroom, never to be found again. They needed a simple plastic sleeve that would slide up the clipper, and then you could just pull it back and dump them all neatly into the trash. 10 years later, I saw exactly that on the drugstore shelf. In 1975, I wished that someone would introduce a bottle that had both shampoo and conditioner so I wouldn't have to mess around with both of them. 1983, Procter & Gamble started selling them. Early in my career, a young woman approached me about illustrating her book. It was risky, so I turned her down, and it went on to be a bestseller. You know, in our heads are probably dozens of great ideas that we're fearful to try and that we don't make the time to put into action. Dozens of suggestions have been shared from this stage this week, but we don't have the courage or the perseverance to make them happen. What a waste. Did you know that America's Got Talent called me 3 times before I said yes? Almost missed out on that one. So what's in your head? What have you heard this week that's just right for you? Are you standing on the high dive with fear gluing your feet to the diving board? Has the elevator door opened and you're wondering whether you should get on and ride it to the penthouse? Did that life-changing idea that just struck you in the middle of the night, but in the light of day, you looked at your notes and you thought it was too crazy? When that light turns on, when the door opens, when the right person sits beside you on the airplane, if you don't step forward, if you don't do something, say something, sign the paper, take the plunge, I can guarantee one thing. I can't guarantee that it's going to succeed. I can't even promise that it's going to be easy. It might even take or cost you everything that you have. But I can guarantee you one thing, that if you don't try it, you'll never know. Hey, write this down. Now never happens again. Life doesn't go backward. Adventures don't come to the faint-hearted. Put in the work. Take a deep breath. Embrace the risk, and then jump! Let me close with one last little sand story snippet to remind you of what you can look forward to next year.
Joe, we've been captivated by the gift of your sand stories the past 3 days. But I feel the best gift you've given us is your personal story of finally overcoming your fears and following your passion. What a wonderful message to close our meeting. Thank you.